Derivatives trading involves substantial risk of loss and is not suitable for all investors. Past performance is not necessarily indicative of future results.
Good morning, everyone. It is Monday, June 24th, 2024. My name is John Pieranunzi, and this is the opening swing. Let's begin today, as we always do, with our news. Beginning with Europe. Europe is up between about 0.5% to about an 0.8%. The news we had a speech by Fed's Waller at 3 a.m. out of Europe. We also had the German IFO business climate, a few European Union bond auctions, and the Great British Industrial Trends order. As I've mentioned, Europe is up between 0.5 and 0.8%. Coming into the U.S. Hours, not a whole lot on the docket today. There's no 8:30 news driver. We have at 10:30 the Dallas Fed Manufacturing Index, a regional Fed index. We also have ECB's Schnabel speaking at 11:30. Two short-term auctions, excuse me, at 11:30 Eastern. And then we do have Fed's Daily speaking at 2 p.m. And really that is all that we have today. There's a little bit more later on in the week, but today that's all we got. So let's take a look at some charts. And we're going to start today with the weekly chart, looking at a little bit higher time frame. And what I want to just glance at very quickly with the weekly chart is just the sort of year-over-year progress we've had in the S&P 500, which is just a really clear trend up. You know, we're in balance with kind of an upward skew in 2023. And then right here, these are weekly bars, by the way, full session weekly bars. And then right here, you know, we opened 2024 balanced and just expanded range higher, retested very close to the 2023 high, but didn't quite get there and continued up. So I'm just showing this to just illustrate the obvious that the S&P 500 is trending higher. And we have not yet found aggressive sellers. But anyway, then we'll take a little bit of a closer look here. And this is our 2024 profile, developing profile. And what we just want to take a look at here is this area, and this area, and just recognize that what we have right here looks kind of like rejection. And also up here as well, where we sort of pushed above and accepted these prices above this sort of balance area that we spent a lot of the year in. And I'm just showing these are very like higher time frame auction landmarks, but they're important because, you know, it kind of shows us the map of where we're at on a higher time frame, which even though I'm probably the smallest time frame trader I still always like to be very aware of this stuff. I refer to it as having the wind at my back when I'm trading. Even a small time frame, I like to know what the larger time frames are doing. But so that's what I kind of wanted to show here is just to be aware that on the highest time frames, we're maintaining a strong upward bias. And it seems pretty obvious, but if you're a short-term trader, you can kind of get really caught in the weeds. Zooming in a little bit more on the weekly chart, let me actually bring this chart in. It's a little bit out of frame. Oops. And so what else we can notice here in the weekly chart is that we are once again just one time framing higher. This is again daily, our full session bars, but we are in the fifth week, potentially the fifth week in progress with a higher low. And we're cognizant of the prior week's low right here. The feature that I want to talk about on this time frame is, as I've said, we have this area where we're in this sort of like trading range down here, and then we got the repricing higher. So our repricing higher happened about here. Prior week's low is very important. We have this area of just completely unauctioned prices, and then up here again we have unauctioned prices. So on the weekly time frame, just the key thing to be aware of with what I've drawn here, and let's zoom in a little bit more so we can see it. But the key thing is we're one time framing higher, so we have that expectation, price discovery up on the weekly time frame. We have the expectation that the prior week's low will be defended and supported ahead of it, and we have the expectation that the prior week's high could be vulnerable to a test if we want to keep pushing. So that's the big thing to just recognize on this time frame today. Let's go to the daily time frame. Here we are on our daily chart. And we're just going to reiterate here, this was kind of our area of that area that I mentioned on the prior chart, in the weekly chart of sort of the range trading, prior trading range below us, and now here is our upper trading range. And we notice this sort of feature in the profile, the developing MC composite of just sort of like a chunk taken out. Like it's almost like this almost could be a normal distribution building, but we have this chunk. So what's that mean for us on the daily, being aware of this sort of feature going on? Well, we have this area here, which is our prior high. And I had drawn this area kind of being aware of it, like the 75s to the 15s roughly, tested lower, continued higher, and we're able to put in a new all-time high before reverting lower. We also have this sort of area in here, which we'll talk about more. But anyway, the key that I want to talk about on the daily chart today is that we put in this high and then we've started to kind of auction lower, and we're pushing into this area. This area is very roughly like the 30s to like around the 05s, and it's very unauctioned. We have roughly the 30s to the 05s. Really clear LVN on this daily time frame. And what's happening is we're seeing the lows since we put in this all-time high, we're seeing the lows get taken, but there's support right below. So what are we expecting today? We're inside the prior day's range. That's key. Normally in this situation, I would give a little bit of edge to the low being taken out. However, we already had a bit of an attempt at the low that was refuted, and we have taken out the prior RTH high, but not the full session high so far. So we're just aware of that. Let's look at this on another chart here. Get rid of that stuff. What we'll look at here is the TPO chart. Okay, again, we're just sort of reiterating what we had where we put in our all-time high. This is Juneteenth. I didn't. This is a new IRT install, so I didn't get the holidays out of here, so that you won't have to worry about that. But we can see in our structure chart here, TPO chart, this is where we pushed above those prior highs, came in, put in our all-time high, and then what I want to emphasize here on this chart is, I won't move the scale, but we had an obvious buyer, obvious support here, and then we had this impulsive day that pushed higher. And we left a lot of single prints. We've taken out these single prints, but we have these single prints here below. Just let me get the adjust this chart frame so we can see. Pause this. Okay, so couldn't correct the scale, but regardless, we'll just pick up here. We saw the impulse higher out of our prior balance, and we had 5 sets of singles left from this day. We've taken 2 of them out. What I kind of want to just kind of want to mention here is being aware of sort of the the velocity of the trade, or the energy of these pushes, where we see this very strong push higher out of. And what does that mean? It means there was support, there are buyers here, there are a quorum of people that wanted to buy these prices that were not getting filled. So the market had to reprice higher. So it's like we saw support down here and a bit of an offer in this area. And then what happened? The buyers just got too aggressive, too impatient, and they repriced higher and said they're willing to buy this price. They're willing to put bids in at this price. And they still weren't getting filled, so it pushes higher, creeps higher. And what are we doing in that situation? We're looking for sellers. And then what did we do? We found them above this price. And These singles right here, these are the 55, 57 half singles are really important because it's just such a clear landmark of the line in the sand from where the sellers took control. That is to say that as I've said, the buyers pushed prices higher and sellers came in and just gave us a real clear line of showing where they want to sell. And we've kind of pushed lower and we're starting to find support here. You can see these excesses where we haven't taken out these singles. These are the 55, 15 singles. These are important. But anyway, so after that push higher, get rid of some of these. After that push higher, we see that this area, the 57 quarters, these single prints are sort of the upper bounds of where the sellers kind of stepped in. And then down here, we're seeing the single prints, these excesses kind of happen down here. So we see, and we have these are the 15 halves. So we have 55, 15 halves up to 55, 57 halves. And this is kind of like the area that we're aware of on this chart. These single prints at 57s down to these single prints at 15s. And we're seeing that the support is coming in ahead of these 15s and resistance is coming in ahead of these. We haven't really challenged them. We also have up here in this region, our key landmark is going to be the 54 area, which is the prior week VPOC. But what I kind of want to just mention on this chart is clear buyer here, clear seller here. We're in the middle, so be aware of that. Let's go to our 8 box and discuss some potential price action in this environment. Okay, so here we have our 8 box trigger chart. And just to discuss some of the areas we have that are important, we have our settlement, prior week settle right in the middle here. We have our prior week's VPOC, which I just mentioned at the 54s, which is kind of in confluence with our singles area. This is the key area above. We've already tested the prior day's RTH high. Our overnight low, developing overnight low, is just a few ticks away from our prior RTH low, which was rejection, but we couldn't push through it. So that'll be an area to be aware of. Our developing overnight low to our prior RTH low down to these 15 half singles, right in this area from about 19 down to 15. Below that, we have the next set of singles. The next set of singles left from 618, which are down around Century. This is the area which I want to kind of show you corresponds with on the TPO chart. Well, actually, I'll do it on the daily. But this area from our 15 half singles down to the Century corresponds with this area of support where we can see as we get below really these 05s, these 55s, it gets harder and harder to buy. So we're seeing the support come in. I want to mention that because it's important how we see the support begin here, but it gets more difficult to buy down there. That's not really a discussion of the price action we might see, but it's just the landmarks that we got in front of us. So I wanted to point that out because in my opinion, it's important. Back to our plan chart. And I kind of ruined our levels. Let's discuss it again. Settlement, developing overnight low down to the RTH low and our 15 half singles. Next set of singles below is the Century mark. And we're expecting the prices below it to be supported if we continue. Above, we have our developing overnight high and our prior RTH high, which our prior RTH high was already tested, and then the big target above, if we push, or the initial target above, well, it's a big target, is 54 halves up to those 57 singles. Next key area above would be the prior week's high. So what can we expect today? So here's the thing. There are 3 possibilities I'm looking at for today. Three possibilities. And I'll mention the nothing scenario first because it would be the more kind of dangerous scenario. You know, the scenario that could confound short-term traders the most, and that would be an inside day, a day that does not test or meaningfully move out of the prior RTH range, which would be some type of action that maybe looks like it wants to hold FS mid after we just put in this high, but kind of drops below, and then maybe we're gonna start getting sold, but then we find support in the prior excess, which I mentioned on the TPO chart. We push higher, and we get some type of kind of a meaningless nothing kind of trade like this that ends up being an inside day. That would be a trade where, for me, the S&P 500 would not provide a lot of opportunity and would actually be a riskier trade that I would be a lot more conservative in. I would look at something like oil. So I want to mention that first. Get rid of that because I didn't center the chart. But I want to mention that first. The big risk today, in my opinion, if you're an S&P trader, would be an inside day that is not identified quickly enough by the trader. If price just does something like this, we try to play continuation, it doesn't work. That could be really messy. And as well, with sort of a tight range like this, only about 25 points or so, 19s up to roughly 45s. There's not a lot of range to play reversion to mean either. So that would be the most difficult situation. If we find ourselves doing that, I would be very conservative. That's what I'm going to do. What's the second scenario that might is a bit more likely and may yield some opportunity? For me, that would be a break and reversion of either of our prior range. So that could look like on the upside, it could look like we open, maybe get a quick test lower that holds RTH levels, we revert back up and take the overnight high. Maybe we get one additional pullback, maybe we don't, and then we push higher somewhere up around or towards these 54s to 57s. We don't actually have to necessarily hit that price, in my opinion, because I could see resistance coming in ahead if today is a slower day. But but some type of test that pushes above the prior RTH high kind of makes an attempt towards the 54s, but doesn't quite get there, and then reverts lower. So let me actually draw this a little bit better because this would be our test and revert scenario on the high. So this would be potentially some type of pullback, holds RTH levels, pushes up, tests the prior RTH high. Looks like maybe it wants to go to 54s, but we get an impulsive move lower, cannot get back out of range, falls back, and then we're back at settlement. So that would be a test higher that attempts out of the prior day's range, but fails and reverts lower back to our settlement, which is the 35 price. That would be something that would be a tradable reversion to mean for me. If we get a setup, we have a couple setups in the accelerator program that cater to price action like this. Likewise, we could get something very similar on the lower end where we put in this overnight high, we tried to retest, we couldn't, where we could get something where between now and the open we sort of drip into the FS levels. It looks like maybe it's a buy, but then we can't get back above settlement or hold above settlement. We continue lower, and we get some type of a test, potentially around the RTH open, of the prior RTH low. We take the 15 half singles, but then what happens is we revert higher, try to get back out of range. We can't, and then we continue back up to settlement again. So either one of these would probably be one of the more tradable scenarios for me. I would not expect them to happen in a super cut and dry way like I've drawn out, because the market always, even when it does what you expect, it does it in its own way. But these would be two potentially tradable scenarios, a break and reversion on either direction that would revert to the settlement price. And I want to mention here, I'm not telling you, I don't know if we get a break and reversion, I don't know how far that break would go. I don't focus on the high. Like if I'm trying to play short reversion, I'm not worried about the high. I'm worried in this situation about the RTH, prior RTH, the prior RTH session high, because what I want to see is I want to see the test, and Are we willing to accept prices outside of here? I don't care if it goes to 54 or 52. It doesn't matter. What I want to see is an attempt of prices above the prior RTH high and then reversion below. So I want to see prices above tested and then fail and see that there is acceptance below. So that's what I'm looking for tests on either side. So anyway, just circling back to our plans, we're aware of a inside day, which is the day that would be the more difficult trade. We're aware of the break and reversion, which could happen on either side and could yield a trade. We're aware of that. And what's the third possibility, which I think would be probably less likely, and that would be a break and continuation. On the upside, what would that look like? Probably the same as the break and reversion. Maybe a hold of RTH level or of FS levels, maybe a quick test lower, reversion higher, hold settlement, gets back up to the RTH high, kind of grinds, pushes higher, tries to pull back, holds the range, continues. Then we get this 54 to 57 range. This would be the key target if you're playing along outside of the prior range. If you're expecting extension above the prior day's high, or if the market shows us that that's what it wants to do, the key target is the prior week's VPOC here. I would expect resistance on any tests above, but once we get to here, it would be, again, a similar thing. If we can push above and hold, then I would be open to grinding continuation to the next area. The target would be the prior week's high up here on continuation, the 75 to 79 area. But the key target would be the 54 to 57 region. And like I said, I would expect resistance on the initial test. So we could get that test and then revert and then get back into range or hold the prior range. On a deep pullback, the prior range would be the key area to hold to see if the buyers do have enough juice to continue. So that would be, if we're looking for if the market shows us it wants to trade higher than yesterday's RTH high, we're looking for the prior week's VPOC target to the 57 singles. If we get a pullback there and we can still hold the prior day's range, then I'd be open for continuation. But if we get a pullback there and fall back into range, then it's a test and reversion that went further. Likewise, on the short side, pretty similar. If we get some type of a push lower that just kind of holds these lower highs and we take the overnight low, the initial target, as I said, for pushing lower, failure below FS levels and failure below settlement. If we start to push below there and we get to the prior RTH low, overnight low, and we take that price, the next price lower, if we cannot revert, would be these 05s, which I mentioned. This area, the 05s to the centuries. Now, this could be more interesting because I think that everyone would expect support somewhere ahead of century. I think there would be a strong expectation of support ahead of century that would get back into range because that's what we've seen with those prior excesses that revert. So that would be my expectation. If we do break the prior day's low and we start to continue, my expectation would be for a test of the 5505 singles, and I would expect support on the initial test of that. The real big surprise, which I'm not expecting today, but the big surprise would be if we break the prior day's range, we fall to these 05 singles, and then we continue below century. If we do that, the 89 naked VPOC from 614 is the next target, followed by these 82s. And at that point, we'd be near 2 vola down, which is significantly more excursion than I'm expecting today. So I'm just doing this for completion. Really, the 5500s to 05s would be the key target area on the downside for me, and I would be aware of potential reversion higher into the range after that. So went way long today. I got to cut it out. I'm using our IRT, Investor RT, for those longer term charts now. So we'll be able to continue to streamline the show, but I think it'll be a higher quality using some of those longer term charts. But anyway, I'm going to cut it off here because, like I said, I'm super long, but I hope that was helpful. I hope that everyone is having a great morning, and I hope that continues into a great day and you're able to improve your trading somehow. And as always, I hope that you can make someone else smile today, because really that's the most important thing. That's what I got for you today. I hope everyone can do well, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.